Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is its unique history. Throughout the world, great stories from faithful church members have only added to that history. This program shares some of these incredible stories of faith, perseverance, hope, and inspiration. You're listening to Legacy. I'm your host, Nathan Wright. You're listening to the Mormon Channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm Matt Henderson, filling in for Nathan Wright. The Missouri era is known as one of the most tragic and violent chapters in Latter-day Saint history. Most members of the church know this era in general terms, like mob violence and driven from the state, and with familiar names such as Far West and Hans Mill. But many of the details of this intense period in church history are available to even the most casual historians due to the records and journals of the time and the work of passionate historians. With us today on Legacy, we have one of those historians, Alex Baugh, professor of church history and doctrine at Brigham Young University. Alex, welcome to Legacy.
Thank you. I've always enjoyed talking about Missouri history. That's where we're going today. And thank you for having me, Matt.
Although this is Alex's first time on Legacy, Alex is no stranger to the Mormon Channel. I'll bet you, Alex, didn't even know that you've done 12 episodes of Past Impressions.
No, I knew I'd done a few, but I hadn't been counting. So,
and most of those dealt with the Missouri era.
Yes.
We want today to talk about an event that I really knew nothing about until I started looking into it for this episode, and that is the Battle of Crooked River. First of all, can you set us kind of up geographically? Where is Crooked River in location to main things we may know in Missouri?
Yes, thank you. I think maybe just a little preface is what you're asking here. Interestingly enough, when I began my graduate work at BYU in American history with an emphasis in Western and Mormon history, I looked at the Missouri period, and the very first, Matt, the very first presentation I ever gave in a symposium or in a conference was on the Battle of Crooked River.
Wow.
As we discuss this, I think we can, I'll try to pull this all together, but it was a pivotal, kind of a key episode in the Mormon War of 1838 and the Mormon hostilities. So it's kind of a very signal event in that period of Mormon history. But I should say, Matt, that the period of Mormon history in Missouri is very, very it's a sad episode in so many ways. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of religious intolerance. I think the Mormons were the victims. There's no question they were the victims in this terrible period. At the same time, I think the Mormons tried to use restraint and tried to do everything they could to abide within the parameters of law. But at the time, of course, things kind of got a little bit out of hand, and the Mormons responded. And I think they had every right to do so, and were justified. So maybe I could just give you the little backdrop of how the battle actually kind of came into being.
That'd be great.
And why there even was a conflict. First of all, I think our listeners should know that the Mormons lived in Jackson County from 1831 to 33, so a period of about 3 years. They were actually forcefully removed from that county in late October, early November 1833. They moved into Clay County, Missouri, most of them, where they were basically welcomed and treated quite hospitably. They remained there for about 3 years again, till August of 1836, when they began to look elsewhere for a place of Mormon location, Mormon settlement. And in 1836, they began moving into what would become Caldwell County, Missouri. and this was located north of what is today Ray County, Missouri. And the Missouri legislature created that county for us, specifically for Mormon occupation. Alexander Donovan, our attorney, church's attorney, he's not LDS, of course, but he helped negotiate that and arrange that through the Missouri legislature. It was just kind of a place where Mormons could come, and they expected the Mormons would settle there, and everyone would leave them alone and would be fine. As things kind of panned out, now it was just kind of a gentleman's agreement the Mormons would remain in Caldwell County, but there's nothing, you can live anywhere you want. It's a free country. But the Mormons went there, and within a short while, the Mormons began kind of spreading elsewhere. So I think the first thing that kind of caught the attention of the Missourians was, hey, we created this county for you. You're supposed to stay in Caldwell County. What are you doing moving up into Daviess County and moving in other localities? And so, again, kind of an innocent thing, but the Mormons could have gone anywhere they wanted, but the expectation was by the local settlers, by the Missourians, that the Mormons would stay put. I think the second thing that kind of began to generate fear in the minds of some of the Missourians was the fact that Joseph Smith actually moved to Missouri. And he moves there in March of 1838, and the first presidency all come, Joseph, Hiram, and Sidney Rigdon. And with the move of Joseph Smith to Missouri, the Missourians are going, wow, this is Mormonism's now headquartered in Missouri. All this time it's been in Kirtland. And I think they sent some red flags that, look out, the Mormons are bound and determined to come here, to come to this region, and it will just be a matter of time. They'll just overrun the territory. So, and
didn't the saints, some of them even have an attitude of like, this is our place?
Yes, kind of a elitist attitude a little bit. It was kind of, well, it was only a matter of time. God's given us this land. It will be ours, and, look out.
And Joseph warned them against doing that.
Absolutely. In fact, all the way through Jackson County, Clay County, and Caldwell, kind of, we'll just gather peacefully and don't broadcast this, So perhaps the Mormons could have been a little more discreet in their view of why they're there and being God's chosen people and so on and so forth. And I think the last thing that I should mention in regards to what caused some alarm among the citizens was the fact that we had a terrible apostasy in Kirtland, and this really is the reason why Joseph is forced to leave Kirtland and come to Missouri. But that apostasy carried over in Missouri. And within just months and weeks, actually, after Joseph arrives, we lose Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, John Whitmer, W.W. Phelps, Frederick G. Williams, William E. McClellan. I mean, the list kind of goes on of
big names,
leading elders. And then, unfortunately, these men remained in Far West and the vicinity and began stirring up dissension. And basically, the Mormon leadership, particularly Sidney Rigdon, made it very clear to them that they were no longer welcome, that they needed to leave, and they were forced out. There's just no question. Most of them went to Richmond. And many of the citizens said, well, what are you doing here? Obviously, something's wrong with Mormonism if these leading elders have left the church and now are on the outside. Obviously, in their minds, they think that the Mormon leadership is corrupt and so on and so forth. It really wasn't, but those kinds of things really sent some red flags, Matt, to the local citizens that perhaps the Mormons, we need to act upon them. So that's kind of the groundwork. Let me just kind of go into the actual events that precipitated or precluded the actual Battle of Crooked River. The Mormons had spilled over into Daviess County, which is to the north. And in those days, we had elections. They had state elections in August. It was the first week of August. It was August 6th. The Mormons actually came to the polling place in Gallatin, the county seat, to vote, and a rabble kind of, assembled, did not want to allow the Mormons to vote. The Mormons were Democrats. The Whig candidate, William Penniston, did not want them voting. Of course, he'd be voted. The Mormons would not vote for him, and so anyway,
they're a big population. I mean, they're a big group of.
Yeah, there's enough to settle the issue physically, and so sure enough, we had a kind of an all-out brawl take place at the election polls, and we're not really sure of all the details, but just what happened was the Mormons held their own somewhat. We don't even know if they actually voted, but the reports got back to Joseph Smith in Far West. This is 20-some-odd miles away, that 2 Mormons were killed. So Joseph goes up there in a day or so, finds out there was no casualties, but there was some, bruised skulls and some other kinds of things. But that kind of set off the populace up there in Daviess County. It kind of sent a clear signal that the Mormons were not welcome. We obviously can't live together. We're just not going to get along. With that, of course, we kind of go into episode number 2, and that is the fact that from this point on, the citizens of Daviess County actually tried to harass the Mormon settlements at Adamon-Diamond, some of the outlying settlements in Daviess County. It got so bad, Matt, that the state militia actually had to come up there and restore order. These Daviess citizens were very upset, very agitated, very intense. The Mormons, again, held great restraint. But General David Rice Atchison, he's the supreme commanding officer of the state militia in the Northwest District there, his subgeneral Donovan, both who were very understanding of the Mormons, they came up there with some troops, basically were able to restore order and settle the peace, but it became a very intense time. That kind of moves us into phase 3, and what happens then, Matt, is these agitators up in Daviess County decided, well, we can't remove the Mormons in our county right now. We've been kind of thwarted by that, but we can drive the Mormons out in a little community called DeWitt.
So they were thwarted because the militia.
Yes, yeah, they basically restored order, said you got to keep the peace, leave the Mormons alone. They decided to take their agitation elsewhere, and many of the ringleaders went down to Carroll County. This is south and east of Daviess and Caldwell, just east of Ray County, and there was a small Mormon settlement there called DeWitt. And at DeWitt, Matt, there was about 200 Mormons, actually about 400 Mormons, and they stirred up the local citizenry and said, let's drive the Mormons out from your county. And for a period of 10 days, October 1 to October 10, they literally starved us out. They surrounded the community. There was just no way the Mormons were going to be able to survive unless they capitulated, which they did. And the agreement was that we would leave, and they did, and most of them moved to Far West. What's interesting is during this time, Mormon leaders actually wrote Governor Boggs and said, we need help. You've got to do something here. Boggs's response was so interesting. He said he just kind of had it. And he said, it's going to be between the Mormons and the mob, kind of duke it out. I can't call out the militia every time there's a disturbance. Well, so here's the setting then. We've been forcibly removed from Jackson County, politically removed from Clay County. They tried to get us in Daviess. They've now taken us out of Carroll County and DeWitt, this little community of DeWitt. It's about time we stand on our own 2 feet. And the governor's not going to help us.
Right.
And like I say, Matt, I feel the Mormons used every bit of restraint that they could, but when kind of push came to shove, I mean, when the dog's in the corner and there's no help, you can't just sit back. Right. And the decision was made to actually go into Daviess County and and actually go after the main perpetrators, and the Mormons did. During the middle part of October, the Mormons up in Daviess County, Joseph Smith came up, a number of Mormon men, 200 plus, and we're not proud of this, Matt, but the Mormons burned some of the perpetrators' homes. Four of them we know of in Gallatin, and a number, about 12 or 15, over in a community called Millport. They didn't hurt anybody. There was no attempt to be violent, other than the fact that we want to send a message: don't leave us alone. Hoping that would settle the issue. Joseph Smith did not participate. He was up there, but he didn't participate. He was at Adam-on-Diamond. After that was done, the Mormon leadership and the Mormon group that came from Caldwell County went back down to Far West. And from that point on, I have to tell you, things got a little bit out of hand. This is when Lyman Wight, he's a Latter-day Saint, he said, we ought to it's basically our turn. Why don't we just try to forcefully remove everybody from Daviess County? We have a right to be here. And Matt, for several days, Mormon groups went through Daviess County, warned the inhabitants that we've had enough. It's time to leave, and you have 24 hours to get out. Won't hurt you, but make sure you leave. So we basically cleansed Daviess County of non-Mormons. Wow. Again, it's not something. I can just understand why that happened, right, based upon all these circumstances. Well, that gets the backdrop now for the Battle of Crooked River. So I know that was kind of a long explanation.
No, that was very good.
But so how do we have this incident take place down at Crooked River? So we'll go in that direction now, because the reports came out that these Mormons had removed most of the non-Mormons, or the non-Mormons, from Daviess County. There was a concern that perhaps the Mormons would do the same and begin penetrating south and burn Richmond. Mormons, we had no intention of that at all. We're done. We feel like now we're in control. And this is where a man by the name of Samuel Bogart, he was a captain in the Ray County State Militia. He lived in Ray County. He was fearful that the Mormons would come down into Ray County and do what they did at Daviess. And so he writes to Atchison and says, I want to raise a patrol and patrol the line between Caldwell County and Ray County and make sure no Mormon comes through here, and make sure there's no disturbances. So Atchison gives him permission. And so he raises about a company of about 30 men, and they begin to patrol the Mormon County line, the Caldwell-Ray County line. Now, I am really, really suspect of Bogart. I think this guy had different intent. I think he's actually going to try to stir the water and try to initiate a conflict. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But what's interesting is he begins to patrol that line, but he goes right into Caldwell County and begins harassing the Mormons and even taking some men prisoner. Wow. So I'm thinking he's trying to bait the Mormons by actually taking Mormon prisoners. Now, we know he took 3 men from this region. These Mormons were peaceful. They had done nothing, but he's on patrol. He takes these 3 men, and sure enough, the word was sent back to Far West that Samuel Bogart and his men have 3 prisoners, and of course the threat was that they would actually kill them. And so when the report arrived, and this was on October 24th, the report arrived in Far West that Bogart had captured these 3 Mormon men. The only way you can call out a legal militia in the county is if there's a number of ways, but one of the ways is the county judge can say there's a disturbance. We need to make sure that this is resolved. And so the judge of Caldwell County, he was a Mormon, Elias Higbee, said we need to to go and get those men. So he called up a volunteer force and issued the order and said, it's okay, go get them. They put Captain Fearnought, and that's David Patton. He was an apostle, put him in charge of this company. And David Patton is one tough guy. Matt, you'd want him on a camp out. I mean, this guy he could make things happen. He was a rough, tough guy. And in fact, they called him Captain Fearnought because he was almost fearless to a fault. Nothing seemed to faze him there. But they were able to get about 60 men eventually to join in this company. They had to find where Bogart was harbored. They had heard reports. They kind of knew about the area. A young man stepped forward by the name of Patrick O'Banion, and he said, I know where they're at. He was an 18-year-old young man, and he, of course, went with the company to try to point out where he believed they were. There's some evidence he was a non-Mormon, but that his parents were Mormon. But he might have been a Mormon, too. We just don't know. But his name's Patrick O'Banion, and sure enough, it's late at night. This is late on the evening of the 24th of October, and this mounted force gets on their horses and heads south through the main road now that's going to lead to Richmond, and they're going to try to find Captain Samuel Bogart and his Ray County militia.
Wow. So now, when they went down to find them, what were they expecting? Were they expecting a confrontation? Were they expecting to be able to sneak in there, get them out? Were they armed? What was their situation?
Yeah, they're fully armed. It's nighttime. It's the middle of the night, and of course, night's a good time to use the element of surprise. Again, I think they were trying to get there as quickly as they could anyway. But they knew they could do it at night and get down there and probably find them and hopefully take care of matters and be done with it. They made their way south, and lo and behold, where Bogart had actually camped was just a mile or so inside the Ray County border. So
the border that he was
patrolling.
Okay.
Yes. Now, that I think is very important to say because strategically the Mormons can only operate inside Caldwell County. So by him just kind of placing himself inside Ray County, by them attacking or if a conflict would occur, they're actually
outside of where they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think he's baiting us. He took the prisoners. There's no need to do that. There was no one coming. And then of course he strategically locates himself in this region that's now outside Mormon Caldwell County and outside the jurisdiction of the Caldwell County militia. Plus, he had them at a location on Crooked River where they had a natural fortification, I could say, the embankment of the river. I mean, there is almost no way, shape, or form. Well, strategically, it's just a perfect place for them to hide out and to wait for somebody to come and an attack occurred. So they came down. They actually picked up some men along the way, including Charles C. Rich. Parley P. Pratt's a member of this group. There's some pretty well-known Mormon names, these men coming down. They came to a man's name by the name of a farm by the name of McDonald. It was about a mile or so from the where they thought that they were positioned. And then they dismounted from their horses. Basically, now they're going to, horses make noise. They're going to cause a little more disturbance. And so they decided to just kind of patrol the area on foot. So they basically walked this mile to try to find out where Bogart was. Now, they're on the main road. They're walking south, again, about 60 men. And they begin to notice something's brewing. They actually came across a picket guard who was, of course, set there by Bogart's men, Bogart and his men, to determine if there was anyone coming. He, according to the record, he did hail them. He said, "Who goes there?" And the Mormons immediately knew that there was, this is probably in the region where they were at. This was about a quarter of a mile from where they were camped. But the man, the Mormons responded, "Friends," and he said, "Well, put down your arms." He claimed he heard someone unsheathed a sword or something, that of course meant someone's going to shoot, or there's going to be an encounter here. And he ordered his other picket guard or whoever was with him to actually shoot and fire. And sure enough, the person out in front was the one leading them to the encampment of the Missourians, and that was none other than Patrick O'Banion. So here's this young man who agreed to help us find him, and sure enough, he's shot. He was not killed at the time; he was fatally wounded. But they kind of just sent him off the side of the road, tried to get some help for him, but they now knew they were in the vicinity, and the picket guard obviously retreated, went to tell the main group of Bogart's men and Bogart that the Mormons are on the path. So within a short time, the Mormons came down off this hill, and the men in Bogart's company had sequestered themselves on this embankment. It's about a 4-foot high embankment, so they had a wonderful, perfect position for defense. And it's beginning to be light in the morning. Now it's early morning of the 25th. So they can see the Mormon army coming and the Mormon men. They had actually divided into 3 groups, 3 main companies, and tried to have a frontal attack, kind of a side attack, and another side attack.
This is Bogart's men?
I'm sorry, this is the Mormons. Okay. Yeah, they had kind of knew how to kind of secure a kind of a perimeter and begin to kind of move in. But again, they were fairly open targets. Bogart had even placed one of the prisoners that he had taken out in front to try to, of course, if they fire, they're going to fire on their own man.
And the human shield kind of thing.
The human shield, exactly. And so anyway, the conflict now ensued. Pretty soon the shots and firing occurred fairly consistent on both sides. I believe Patton was on one of the flanks, and he was a target because he had a white blanket coat on, so he kind of just stood out. Yeah. And he was wounded, and that will of course prove his he will suffer as a result of that. He'll die because of that wound. But the Mormons did have the greater manpower. The Missourians had the better defense. But eventually the Mormons were able to kind of proceed through the fire, the initial fire, and they did rout the Bogart's men. They fled across the river. Mormons were still kind of firing, and basically they dispersed. So the Mormons, kind of took over. Now there was some. It looks like there was some hand-to-hand combat. One of the Mormons who was killed in this exchange, kind of the hand-to-hand combat, was a man by the name of Gideon Carter, and he was cut up pretty good. Apparently, with knives or dirks or swords or something, he was engaged in some kind of man-to-man conflict there, and he was really disfigured. The Mormons actually thought, Parley Pratt, I think it was, or one of them, thought that this was a Missourian. He was just so disfigured. They even left him because they thought it was one of their men. They came back later and realized that was who it was, Gideon Carter, and retrieved the body and took it back to Far West. But the Mormons caused them to scatter. They left, the Bogart's men left their tents, their horses. They were kind of camped on the ground in front of the embankment. So the Mormons actually confiscated their goods and took them back to Far West. Now, at this point in time, we sent runners to tell Joseph and the others, it's morning now, that an encounter had occurred. Some messengers went to Far West, and word was soon reached Joseph Smith that something had happened, and Joseph and Heber C. Kimball and others immediately headed south to try to intercept the Mormon company to find out what had happened. In the meantime, they took the spoils, I guess you'd say, and began heading north. At this point in time, it became very clear that Patton was not going to make it, and O'Banion either. And so they began moving northward and got as far as a man by the name of Stephen Winchester's home. And there, Patton, he lasted a few more hours. His wife came. He was able to say goodbye, but we lost Patton a few hours later. And he was very, it was kind of a noble kind of passing. He told his wife, whatever you do, do not deny the faith. Just days before, actually, Thomas B. Marsh, his dear friend of the 12, had apostatized, and I think that's what he was kind of referring to. But Joseph, of course, was very, very hurt and taken back that there had been this terrible casualty of a Mormon apostle, Patrick O'Banion, this 18-year-old boy who dies, and also of Gideon Carter. These men were buried up in Far West a day or two later, I can't remember exact date, in military honors. So this is a very tragic kind of event because, of course, it didn't need to have happened. But I really think, Matt, that Bogart was trying to bait the Mormons to get them to do something that he would consider illegal, and now the state could actually go after the Mormons and say, you've been doing acts perpetrated against the state of Missouri, particularly the state militia, and cause kind of an uproar to give reason and purpose for now removing the Mormons.
Right. I want to go back just a little bit here. These were all Mormon volunteers.
Yes.
Yet they seemed quite well organized.
Yes. There's no question, again, that these men had drilled as county militia men. They were members of the Caldwell County Militia, many of them. We did have a group of Mormons at this time who were known as the Danites. Right. And there were some who were part of this group as well. There's kind of an intermixing of both legitimate Mormon militia and kind of this little extra legal group. But they were certainly commanded. This whole entire force was commanded under a legal operation by Elias Higbee, the judge, to actually, go subdue this situation, So I think we can say, did they operate legally? Absolutely. Until, of course, as I mentioned, they crossed over into Ray County. They really had no legal jurisdiction outside their own county. But I think Bogart had some other kind of intent there.
So from first shot to last, how long did this last?
It's kind of hard to say. Of course, back in those days, you had to. It took time to load, time to reload, this kind of thing. I think it was relatively short, a matter of, not certainly didn't go on for hours upon hours, probably just a matter of a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most, when it became apparent the Mormons had the superior numbers. The Missourians, of course, eventually realized they could probably overcome us and did the retreat. Now, here's the amazing postscript. So Mormons are back in Far West. Bogart and his men have retreated, and immediately word was dispatched to Governor Boggs in Jefferson City by Wiley Williams. Wiley Williams reported to the governor, Matt, that every single person in Bogart's company had been killed, or they'd all been killed. Most of them all had been killed. Why is that significant? Well, when Boggs hears this, he goes, wow, the Mormons are really enemies of the state. And this is when, Matt, he issues the famous extermination order.
Because Bogart's been appointed to guard this, set up this picket.
He's legal.
He's a legal official entity there.
And the Mormons have now operated against the legal state militia force. Boggs goes, we've heard the most alarming news. Now, I should mention, the Mormons had killed one man in the encounter. The man's name was Moses Rowland. And so they only had one fatality. Probably five men were injured. So the Mormons at the time, 9 men had been wounded, 1 had been killed, the Gideon Carter. And of those 9, as I mentioned, both Patrick O'Banion and Patton had been killed. So the Mormons suffered the greater casualties. The kind of the ironic thing is they're going there to rescue the 3 prisoners, and 3 of our men are killed. So when Boggs hears that, that's when he immediately signs the famous order and says the Mormons now must be, we need to act against them. And he calls out a massive number of state militia now to go subdue the Mormons. So why is the battle significant? Well, it sets off the governor to actually now, it's the turning point. It's the hinge of the whole war, of the whole conflict, because now Boggs is determined to remove the Mormons from the state. Right. Even though, again, I think we had every right to try to remedy the situation. The situation, of course, escalated to the point that this conflict occurred.
Let's talk just briefly about the extermination order. We use the word extermination, and in our vernacular today, that means wipe out, destroy,
annihilate,
kill.
Yeah.
Is that what was intended?
I can safely say at this point in time, no. And that I think we've placed a kind of a 21st century or 20th century definition, like you say, on the word exterminate. In fact, I think the exact words of the order was the Mormons must be treated as enemies and exterminated or driven from the state. Well, how do you exterminate them and then drive them from the state? And you look at an 1828 Webster's Dictionary, the first American dictionary. The very first definition, Matt, for exterminate says to remove from within one's borders. And it's clear to me Boggs is not out there to create bloodshed. In fact, months later, he said, I issued the extermination order to avoid the effusion of blood. Prior to 1861 and the Civil War, states' rights prevailed, and governors had a lot of power. Well, they still do, but he's basically saying, I've had it with the Mormons. I don't want to deal with them anymore. Let's just force them out of the state. Let them go somewhere else. There's plenty of territory. Anywhere. They could go anywhere. And so in his mind, the answer to the solution was, let's just force them, get an agreement with them, they will have to leave the state. And that's exactly what happened. So for someone today to say the Mormons, the idea that Boggs wants to kill all the Mormons, that I don't think that's true at all. I'm not saying what he was doing was politically correct. Right. He violated a lot of civil rights, but this is a different time and age. And in his mind, the best way to handle this situation was to get the Mormons out of the state, let them go somewhere else, hopefully where they could abide peacefully. But he's not out to kill Mormons.
Right. Let's go back quickly to Patton and O'Banion, who were wounded and eventually died.
Yes.
Do you think, were their wounds so severe that they could not have been saved, or had there been a surgeon on hand, could they have been saved?
I think they were both fatal wounds. Medical procedures back in those days, of course, were pretty rudimentary. Yeah. They just didn't have the medical knowledge. Again, if the wounds were in less vital parts of the body, they may have survived or could have made it. But, I think it was pretty evident. I don't think it would have necessarily bled to death, but the fact that the wounds would force internal damage. So even if they would have had the very best medical help, probably would not have survived. Right. And it's unfortunate, of course, that those things happen. These were probably fairly good men, and it's just ironic that kind of who are the two that, plus Gideon Carter, that suffer as a result of it. Here's the man who's in command, and usually the commander, of course, would survive this kind of an operation. And then here's the young man who's willing to help the Mormons find where this group was, and he's picked off. So kind of a sad thing. I should mention the Mormons did take one prisoner. His name was Wyatt Cravens. They allowed him to eventually go, but they took him with them for a short time. So that's kind of significant. I think I should also mention that this whole incident played out in the prosecution of the Mormon leaders. When the Mormons finally agreed to surrender to Samuel Lucas on October 31st, Joseph Smith, of course, meets with them, and he's taken prisoner. But the following day, the Mormons agreed to turn over their arms and to end the conflict and leave the state. It's interesting, the state officials, who did they come after? Well, they went after, of course, the Mormon leaders, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, Hiram. Mm-hmm. But the other group they actually tried to go after is those who participated in the Battle of Crooked River. Mm. And just to kind of set the stage there, as it became apparent the Mormons were going to have to surrender, the council of church leaders was anybody who participated in the Battle of Crooked River, you better get out of state, because we didn't know we were going against. They thought they were just kind of regular, mob-like guys, not officially connected to the militia. And Brigham and others said, "You better leave." Well, most of them did leave, and they went to Anamonde-Amon, and then went up into Iowa, and then made their way east over to Montrose. The Crooked River Boys are the men who actually come in contact with a man by the name of Isaac Galland, and Isaac Galland is the man who's going to negotiate with the Mormons, helping them gain acquisition to the land in Lee County and in Hancock County for Nauvoo. So the Crooked River Boys got us in contact with the man who's going to actually help us get us in Nauvoo. But the interesting thing is the men who did not get out are arrested, and they are Parley P. Pratt, Norman Shear, Darwin Chase, Luman Gibbs, and Morris Phelps. And these men are prosecuted in Richmond. They're actually incarcerated in Richmond until May of 18.
So it's October to.
They're arrested in October. That's correct. They're incarcerated in Richmond until May, and then they have a change of venue, and they're sent down to Boone County, Columbia, and they finally will make their way out. They'll actually escape on July 4th, Independence Day. It's a great story. But these men are in prison longer than Joseph Smith, Sidney, Hiram, and the ones in Liberty Jail. So the state went after those men who were in the Crooked River battle that they could round up, and those were the men.
Wow. You've been listening to Legacy on the Mormon Channel from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We've been talking today with Alex Baugh, professor of church history and doctrine at Brigham Young University. We've been discussing the Battle of Crooked River. As we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts about this event and its influence on church history?
Well, I think number one, as we mentioned here, it really was the turning point in the Mormon War, the Mormon conflict, because Boggs now made the decision to actually remove the Mormons. Had Crooked River not happened, maybe things would have been different. And yet at the same time, that's hard to project, but it certainly led him to believe the Mormons needed to be removed from the state. So I think that's very, very significant. Of course, Matt, we lose an apostle. This is a man, remember, the Quorum of the 12, and the second in seniority, and technically with Thomas B. Marsh having apostatized about that same time, you could maybe put the case out that Patton was the senior member of the Quorum of the 12, and then, of course, there's Brigham Young next. And with Marsh out of the church and Patton dead, Brigham Young's now the senior member of the Quorum of the 12. So that changes the whole complexion of Mormon leadership in terms of the 12. I think we can also say that this battle probably affected Joseph Smith as much as anything. Now, the very next day, the next week, we'll have the incident at Haun's Mill, in which 17 men and boys will eventually, who died either within...
So the next week.
Yeah, on October 30th, just a few days later. So I think the terrible tragedy that took place at Crooked River, plus this tragedy at Haun's Mill, Joseph recognized at this point things could get a lot worse unless we surrender and just submit to Missouri authority. So I think it really had strong implications that the Mormons needed to just sue for peace, whatever, and comply, which was very, very painful to Joseph Smith because, of course, this is where the Mormons fully intended to establish kind of a base of operations and try to establish Zion. Now where do we go? And of course Joseph will be in jail for several months. But so this affected Joseph Smith. There's no question, to see actual human life sacrificed, if you will, for the cause. And so this kind of was the low point of the Mormon-Missouri conflict. And certainly brought heartache to the families who lost loved ones who were wounded in this. And one of the men, James Hendricks, was shot in the neck, and he was paralyzed the rest of his life. Now, he survived, if you can imagine. Basically, he was, I guess you could say, a quadriplegic. Ends up coming to Utah. Really? And settles up in Richmond. He was Richmond, Utah, and he was a bishop up in Richmond in a wheelchair. Wow. So you can imagine the life-changing circumstances for some of these wounded men and their condition. So things changed and fortunately got brighter over in Nauvoo. We regrouped. I do like the idea that President Hinckley said many years ago, that the church has never taken a step backwards. And I really believe that, Matt. In spite of the conflict, in spite of the misunderstanding, in spite of the hardships and heartache and everything else, the church moved on. And, I mean, to think that, these kinds of episodes could happen and people remain true. They remain faithful. They knew they had testimonies. Yes, there was misunderstanding with our Missouri neighbors. Yes, there was rumor. Yes, there was all these things. And in spite of that, in spite of the apostasy of some of the leading brothers, the church came through. I think that's remarkable, that in spite of these terrible incidents, these tragedies, that as church, we picked it up and moved forward with the kingdom. And hopefully we learned a few things, and would perform better where we ended up. And I think we did. So I think that's a remarkable thing about these early episodes in Mormon history that we look as tragic episodes, and indeed they were. But you know what? We just moved on. We took our lumps. We learned some things. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe but the kingdom's true. The gospel's true. The kingdom rolls forth, and we just need to be on board. That's the main thing. Right. And these members, the remarkable number, remain true and faithful to the kingdom in spite of the hardships and difficulties. I think that's a great thing that we can kind of take from these kinds of things. Well said. Well, thank you, Alex, for being with us here on Legacy. Thank you. Maybe we'll do it again. For more information on this program and other programs on the Mormon Channel, join us at mormonchannel.org. I'm Matt Henderson, filling in for Nathan Wright.
I'm Nathan Wright, and you're listening to the Mormon Channel of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We invite you to listen to new episodes of Legacy Saturdays at 1 o'clock. You can also download any Legacy episode at mormonchannel.org.